Good evening and welcome to Q&A. I'm Hamish McDonald, live from Melbourne, here to answer your questions tonight. Former Liberal Cabinet Minister, now commentator Amanda Vanstone. British singer-songwriter and political activist Billy Bragg. The Assistant Minister for Home Affairs, Linda Reynolds. Tasmanian Labor Senator Lisa Singh. And People's Panellist, Martin Matthews, who's a young businessman who wants forward-thinking political leadership. Please welcome our panel tonight. The Q&A is live in Eastern Australia on ABC TV, iView and, of course, News Radio. Tonight we're hoping to get to the school strike, party shenanigans and protest songs. But our first question tonight comes from Marg Darcy here in the audience.
Thanks, Hamish. Given the chaos in the current federal government, I wonder if what the panel thinks about, in the best interests of the coalition and the Australian people, should they go to an early election?
Amanda Vanstone, should we just call it now, go to an election?
No, I wouldn't. Things are a bit messy internally, but the machinery of government goes on. You know, I saw the other day someone saying, well, they're only sitting for 10 days, is it, in the first half of next year? And I thought, do people think that's the only time parliamentarians work? When they're sitting in Parliament? Actually, when Parliament's sitting, people are back in their offices, largely. Look, it's not up to me, obviously, but if it was me, I wouldn't call an election now because someone else told me to, especially not a Prime Minister who had a chance to go earlier himself and didn't.
Linda Reynolds, it's pretty hard to focus on the business of government or get anyone to even pay attention to it when the whole place seems to be on fire.
Well, there is a lot of noise out there, but I can say that there's absolutely no reason that we should go to an early election. People have elected this government to do its full term, and the government is going to do its full term. And as Amanda has said, we're getting on with business. Yes, there are some messiness in our parties at the moment, but government still goes on and the parliament still goes on. What people don't realise is that we've been a very good government. It sometimes gets a bit lost. You might be doubtful of that, but we have got unemployment down to its lowest level in 10 years. We've got over 1 million people in work. We've gone into new free trade agreements. So the government is still getting on, but the parliament is.
Does it disappoint you that your party seems to be fighting itself so aggressively that not many of us can even observe those realities?
Unfortunately, people very rarely see what goes on in Parliament, and a great example, it was last week, is this Parliament passed, and I was the minister who passed, modern slavery legislation, which is something that everybody in the Parliament agreed to. It was multi-partisan, but yet how many people here have heard about that? And, you know, we've passed over 300 bills in the Senate where the government hasn't had the numbers, and we do get on with business.
We are going to talk about modern slavery later on in the program. We've got some questions from the audience on that. Lisa Singh, your colleague Penny Wong today stood in the Senate and said, why don't you guys get on with it? It's such a mess. Let's go to a vote.
Absolutely, absolutely. And your question is spot on. Linda, I have to give you full credit, though, for gilding the lily, because what we have at the moment is absolute chaos, it's absolute dysfunction, and the sooner we have an election, the better for the whole nation.
Is it any worse than the chaos and dysfunction last time Labor was in power?
Yes, I think it is, to be honest. I think it absolutely is. And I mean, I've just heard tonight there's been an emergency meeting being called by the Prime Minister to kind of put in a rule change to not change the leadership so easily. So there you are. But
I mean, it's kind of what Kevin Rudd did at the end, isn't it?
Well, I think true, but no kind of emergency meeting tonight is going to resolve this chaos. The only thing that's going to resolve this chaos is by going to the people and calling an election. And I think that's, to be honest, I think that's what the people want.
Hamish, just in relation to the meeting tonight, this is something that I called for the day after the last leadership challenge, and I firmly believe that just because you can do something, you can change your leader under our system of government, it doesn't mean you should. And
do you regret doing it the day after rather than the day or the week before?
Well, no, not at all. And I called for that. My colleagues know, we've been discussing this for 3 months. So while the meeting is being held tonight, I think it is something that all Australians want, is when you go to the election, you vote for your local member, and you've got a leader of a party who you expect will be Prime Minister, then that Prime Minister should serve for those 3 years. So the party room rules are nothing are nothing unusual, they're nothing unexpected, and I think it is a very sensible thing to do before the election.
Martin Matthews, you're a voter. Would you like to see this government put it all to a test a bit sooner?
Look, I don't think it's necessary to go to an election now. I think the parliament is functioning. It's actually, as much as we're all, I think, very frustrated with the state of politics, in some ways it's a fascinating parliament. You've now got, a balance of power that's really controlled by the crossbenchers. Today you've just seen Karen Phelps put forward a bill, to take refugees off Nauru. So we're actually seeing influence from some very sensible centrist politicians. And I'd like to see that play out. So I don't think it's necessary to call an election yet.
Billy Bragg, what's your sense of things right now? You've flown in. You can give us the bird's eye view of how this all looks. Do you think it looks like it's on fire?
Well, I just saw the announcement that it's going to put a time limit on changing the leader. I think it's very dangerous to put time limits on things. Obviously, the changes in leadership, whichever party is in Australia, it's a manifestation of something going on within the system. In 2010, the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrat coalition passed a law mandating 5-year parliaments. We're in a situation now where we desperately need an election, probably to resolve the issue of Brexit. It's probably the only way we're going to do it, whether or not we have a referendum or whatever deal we face. But because of the 5-year rule, it's almost impossible to bring the government down. So the politicians have kind of trapped themselves in this situation. So I think putting time limits on it is quite a dangerous tactic.
All right. Well, our next question tonight comes via Skype from Gary Franks, who is from the seat of Hughes in Sutherland in New South Wales.
Thank you, Hamish. Craig Kelly has been my federal MP for Hughes since 2010 and has a known conservative worldview and opinion in politics. My personal experience over this time that he served his constituents like myself and the community in general efficiently and personally. So the question to the panel, when our democratic society insists on tolerance, inclusivity, diversity and long-term continuity of politicians, why is a successful federal MP who is quietly achieving all that he was elected to undertake being targeted by moderate Liberals whose desire is conformity and uniformity to their more radical political worldviews and agendas?
Linda Reynolds, is Craig Kelly the quiet achiever?
Look, this whole issue, I understand he has actually been pre-selected today, in fact. So this is really an issue for the New South Wales Liberal Party.
Well, I don't think he was pre-selected. I think they've obfuscated the process.
This is an issue, as it is in your party, this is an issue for the state divisions of the party.
But the federal party has overridden effectively because the Prime Minister has said, I don't want these to go to pre-selection, I want him to hold...
That's not the federal party, that's the Prime Minister expressing a view.
That's the Prime Minister expressing a view, and he is a member of the New South Wales Liberal Party, so...
So he wasn't doing it as the Prime Minister?
Well, he is a Prime Minister.
Well, he is the Prime Minister.
He can't not be.
You can't say that he's not the Prime Minister. But very clearly, this is an issue under our system of government, under our party rules for both parties, it is an issue for the New South Wales Liberal Party. And I'd say this, Hamish, is that pre-selections are always difficult. And they should be difficult because all of us, none of us should expect to be pre-selected. It needs to be tough.
Why should the party, and whatever part of the party it is, intervene to protect him when they didn't for some of the female sitting MPs?
Again, this is an issue for the New South Wales Liberal Party, and I'm from Western Australia, from the Liberal Party there, and I cannot comment. We have different pre-selection processes in each state.
So you don't mind?
Well, it's up to the New South Wales Liberal Party and to the local branches, in this case in Hughes, and the local Liberal Party to work out how they do the pre-selection.
In each state have
very different.
Not entirely different, but quite a lot of states have very different.
So do you think Craig Kelly, Amanda Vanstone, is being forced out by the radical ideology of the moderates in the Liberal Party?
I'm a moderate in the Liberal Party, and I don't regard myself as a radical, and I'm not sure that anyone else does. I certainly know that the far right in the Liberal Party get annoyed and say there's no right-winger at the ABC, and I think, well, hold on, I'm a Liberal, yeah, but you're not right-wing. OK. I don't think people are forcing out. Look, it's a member's job, frankly, to keep in touch with their electorate, and that includes the Liberal Party in their electorate. That would be my view. And if the Liberal Party in your electorate doesn't want you, see you later, Jack.
Are you a true Liberal in the sense that is being articulated by the likes of Craig Kelly today?
Well, I haven't heard what he said. I'm not a follower of his views. Well, I can tell you, he's a climate change denier. I mean, I think he really kind of fits a little bit into the phrases that Minister Kelly O'Dwyer has used. You know, I mean, Kelly O'Dwyer has described a number of people in the far right of the Liberal Party as anti-women, climate change deniers, homophobic. I'm not saying Craig's all of those, but he's definitely a climate change denier.
Okay. There are some people like that, you know what, in the electorate at large. So I'm a bit over everyone having to be the same. Everyone in the Labor Party is not the same, as you know. The left and right of the Labor Party don't agree.
No, but Amanda, I think this shows the civil war that's going on.
I didn't interrupt you. I'm happy for you to go on if you like, and I'll finish when you've finished interrupting.
Well, I just think it shows that... I just think it shows the civil war that's going on. Getting back to Charles asking the question, within the New South Wales branch of the Liberal Party, where you've got the former Prime Minister weighing in this morning and last night on Twitter.
No.
You've got the moderates and the Conservatives absolutely at each other, and it's imploding the Liberal Party right across the nation.
I don't think that's true. I mean, I've been in the Liberal Party for a long time. I served for about 23 years in Parliament. You don't get that for murder, incidentally. but you know, there are more Conservative people in the Liberal Party, and there are more moderately minded people called the moderates and the dries. But that's true in the community as well. The community disagrees on some things, so I think it's not a bad thing. I don't want to say to a far right winger, you're not entitled to have a view.
Let me bring Martin Matthews in here. I know you've described yourself as probably being inclined towards voting for the Liberal Party. Does someone like Craig Kelly represent your views?
Look, he doesn't, but that's not. That isn't the point. I mean, I think the point is that it has always been a party with a broad set of views in it. But I think it'd be crazy to say that the divisiveness in the party today isn't worse than it once was. I mean, that's just denying what is playing out, right? So
there's been a big argument in the party in New South Wales about opening these pre-selections up to a vote of the membership. That is what was unfolding. It looked like he wouldn't win that because the moderates seemed to have the numbers in that particular constituency. Now you have the party coming in and saying, no, he should stay. So
it's an unusual circumstance, and I think this is a symptom of everyone talking about treating the symptoms rather than the cause. And same with the leadership change rules, right? Putting in a 2/3 rule is treating the symptom just because we've had leadership changes. The problem is the division, and the problem is that they don't seem to be able to negotiate in any kind of meaningful, constructive way. So if you go back to sort of the previous Conservative leaders, and I identify as a small Liberal, right? So I don't share the views of a lot of the Conservative members of Parliament, but previous Conservative leaders like John Howard and John Anderson in the deputy role were always able to take a more constructive approach to engaging with policy. So it wasn't about it's my way or the highway. It was really about a view that let's take things slowly. You know, those of us that are more progressive in our views, we like to change things for the better, but in doing so, there's always a risk that you know, there's unintended consequences. And Conservatives at their best, they're just the guys that say, whoa, slow down a second, guys, let's think this through. And that's a constructive way to engage. What we're seeing is something else.
Linda.
Hamish, I've been a member of the Liberal Party now for 30 years, and I love the Liberal Party, and I love the fact that we can have arguments and debates and that we do reflect difference of opinion in the community. So, yes, we do have people who are more perhaps smaller Liberal and more libertarian and Liberal, and yes, we do have some more Conservatives. But that's what I love about our party is that we do have these debates.
But do you think it's working in your favour at the moment?
But what we're discussing is no different. You have a look at divisions in society and in the Senate, as Amanda said. The Senate, I think, is now truly representative of a broad range of views across the community. And you have a look at what's happening in the United States, what's happening in the UK with Brexit, and you've seen riots in France. In a lot of Western democracies now, we are going through change, and what is happening, and it's not just in my political party. I mean, Lisa herself had, no one knows more than Lisa does about, pre-selection problems in parties.
All right, our next question tonight comes from Sasha Silverstone in the audience.
Over the past year in particular, it would seem that every action and decision in the Liberal Party that has been taken to appease that right-wing group has resulted in more turmoil and chaos for the government, not least being the removal of a Prime Minister, the loss of key safe seats such as Wentworth, and Julia Banks quitting, resulting in a minority government. Will the intervention of Scott Morrison into Craig Kelly's pre-selection alienate those moderates even more? And is Prime Minister Morrison incapable of learning from his party's mistakes?
Martin Matthews, let me start with you. Does it alienate you when you see something like this happen? Craig Kelly being saved, even though clearly members of the party in the local electorate don't seem to want him there.
I don't see this specific issue that way necessarily. There are other factors as to why they might have called off the pre-selection. It is close to an election at this point, so it is reasonable to say, let's just go with the team we've got. Look, Craig Kelly doesn't share my politics, but as I said, there's always been a conservative base to the party, and I think it's about finding a way to engage with that constructively. So it's not this specific issue that's the problem. It's the fact that the party can't come together to actually come to a coherent view on what they stand for and find a way to negotiate, frankly, behind closed doors before they air all of this dirty laundry in public.
Billy Bragg, I'm interested to know what you observe in Australia's Liberal Party, this idea of a broad church.
Yeah.
Can you have a party that contains all of those views and keep it together and keep it united in the time that we live in?
Well, I don't know if it's similar here in Australia, but in the UK, the politics has moved away from the centre. It's moved out to, I wouldn't say the extremes, but it's moved to clear differences between the political parties. During the Blair years and the Cameron years, the parties were all on the centre ground. Now, I mean, there is no such thing as a radical centrist. I mean, that's the fact.
But there are still centrists, clearly, in this particular government.
Yeah.
And they seem to be at war with the people on the right of the party.
Well, I think when you're trying to control who gets into Parliament, these issues are always going to come up. There are similar things go on within the Labour Party and in the Conservative Party in the UK. But I'd like to echo what Amanda was saying and maybe paraphrase it, which is that there are a lot of narrow-minded old toe rags out there and someone's got to represent them. That was more or less what you said, wasn't it?
It's democracy.
That's what,
But you have voluntary voting, don't you?
Yeah, we do have voluntary voting.
There's a difference in the UK because they have voluntary voting. So, and in the United States, it's voluntary. So you tend to get there the more extreme people, the not true believers, but well, I think the extreme people voting, and a lot of people in the middle take things for granted. Here, you can't. You've got to show up at the booth. You can pretend to mark your paper or write something rude on it, but you have to show up.
In my country, when the centrists in the Labour Party tried to fix things with the electorate by introducing a load of people who weren't members into the process for voting for leader, they ended up with Jeremy Corbyn, the most left-wing leader they ever had. The centrists had totally underestimated the mood of the people. Same thing happened with Brexit. Look what's happened with Macron in France. Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was going to win from the centre in the United States of America. The centre has lost its traction, and our politics around the world, I think, is moving, I wouldn't say extremes, but it's moving back towards a traditional left and right.
You're nodding at that. Do you think the centre has lost its traction, Senator Reynolds?
I think I do agree with Billy that here in Australia we are seeing a polarisation of politics. So you are getting more people who would be described perhaps as progressive and those who are a little more conservative socially. So, and they don't always understand each other. So, for example, when we all work together on things that we're passionate about, modern slavery and those issues that relate to democratic freedoms and things we all agree, people actually don't see that. But the people who are on the left and on the right, as Billy said, don't really understand each other anymore, and they demonise each other, which is very unhelpful. And I think in this country we've got to find a way to have these robust but respectful debates on issues and opinions, because when I listen quite often...
Doesn't your party need to find a way to do that first?
But this is my point, Hamish. I think because we are a party of both, we, like the rest of society, we're also finding ways, as society progresses, how we can keep that balance. And we don't always get it right.
Amanda Vanstone, you were sticking your hand up.
Well, look, I think politics generally has become a sort of biff-biff game, and that's flown into the parliament as well, very much so, so that if somebody in opposition comes up with something, the government will probably say what's wrong with it, and if the government comes up with something, the opposition will say what's wrong with it. And that's the core of it, where day-to-day stuff is being chucked across a boxing ring, if you like, when really it should be, well, you're the government, how can we improve this legislation? But we've got to a point now where, and I think three-year terms are a part of it, because the opposition starts straight after the election trying to bring the government down. I think if you shifted to longer terms, you'd see less of that.
Lisa Singh, Labor has at times stood in the way of legislation. I know you say regularly that you will work with them. There have been times where the government would say you've been obstructionist.
Oh, come on. I mean, I think it's really interesting that we're talking about all of this This is the last week of Parliament for the year. We should be debating policy. We should be talking about those things. They're the things that Australians want us to be talking about. Instead, it's been taken up with emergency leadership meeting, rule change,
Well, not Parliament hasn't
a
been.
backbencher, Conservatives. This has been happening in the Parliament tonight.
It's in the building, but not in the Parliament itself.
But something going on with Craig Kelly.
People have a meeting in the
pre-selection.
Parliament.
These are the things. These are the reasons why Australians get fed up with politics.
All right. This is not the dispatch box.
Lots of things happen in the Parliament,
across this.
but it's not
the next
the
question
Parliament.
tonight comes from Kurt Smith, who's in the audience.
Thanks, Hamish. I'm a resident of the Chisholm electorate and I'm concerned with the drama surrounding Julia Banks. She's failed to call out her bullies and won't bring down the government. So at this point, is she just grandstanding to save her seat?
Linda Reynolds.
Look, for many years, I've worked towards getting more women in the army and now in politics. So I'm the first one to say that the Liberal Party has more work to be done to have more women. The issue that I have with this, and that many other women have in the Liberal Party, is we don't believe in quotas. So like in other professions, we're working on ways to bring more women into Parliament and into the party as well. In relation to Julia, I'm very sorry that she has done what she's done. I can't speak for her because I haven't experienced, I haven't been in her shoes and experienced what she's experienced. But I spoke out very strongly at the last leadership challenge, and I spoke out in the Senate. My comments weren't related to gender, but they were in relation to behaviour, because I saw behaviours in the Parliament that we've still seen today by all parties that I think it lets Australia down. We need to have far more respectful debate, but we need to have much more robust debate. And I think in our adversarial system, we've forgotten that the adversarial nature shouldn't be in name-calling, it should be on policies. And we've got a lot more to do as a Parliament across the...
Do you accept, though, that your party has a problem with women?
We've only got, with 8 out of 10 of our elected representatives across the country as blokes, yes, we do have more work to do. And that's what I'm doing. I'm not talking publicly about this, because if you want to change, you don't change it.
You had started to sound like you were going to talk publicly about this, and then you stopped. Why?
I can sit there with a megaphone and talk about this publicly, but that doesn't actually realise change within the organisation. Just as with the Army, we actually needed to talk about it, to accept that we've got an issue, and the Liberal Party does accept we need more women. Apart from anything else, women make fabulous MPs, and I think we could be more successful with more women. The question is, how do we get women to put their hand up, and then also to run?
We have got another question on this. It comes from Josephine Burns in the audience.
Ms Vanstone, my peers and I are continually disappointed by the lack of gender diversity in the Parliament, the overt sexist commentary during parliamentary sittings, and the reports of bullying behaviour. Why would I and my peers pursue a career in politics when the environment doesn't appear to welcome women, and what advice would you give to us?
Well, think carefully, I would be my first advice, because, it's the battle of ideas, and so it can get a bit rough. And if you're the sort of person who wants to go somewhere and say, oh, this is my view, and expect everybody to shut up and say, listen, and then say, oh, that's lovely, dear, it's not the job for you. It's going to be a battle. I'd like to see more women in. We had a lot of women in '96. It's not as easy for us to get them in, though. We don't have a union movement that can just churn them up for you. There's an organisational structure that allows the union movement to nominate people and get them in.
There's also a quota system in the Labor Party.
We don't have that, but we don't have that organisational structure to assist us like that.
Isn't it your members who are electing them? Isn't it down to that as well?
We've always said in the past it's a great thing that local people in a seat get to choose their member. Now, in my state, if you're a member of the Liberal Party in that seat, you can go along and vote. But in some states, those members elect people to vote, and it gets sort of smaller and smaller. And maybe we need to look at something like that so there's a broader choice, a broader number of people, a range of people actually choosing. But if I can just come back to Banks for a minute.
Sure.
I'd like to know, everyone says, oh, poor Julia Banks was bullied. Do you know what? Unless I've been in some coma, I haven't read what bullying she was subjected to, by whom and when. I'm a bit annoyed at the people who say, oh, I've been bullied. Have you really? Well, let's deal with it but just I've been bullied and I want attention for it and I'm leaving because they bully me. Tell you what, if I was there, I wouldn't be putting up with it.
The new Prime Minister had said that there would be an investigation, that it would be followed up. Do you think they did?
Well, I don't know. I'm not in Canberra, but what's the name of that Labor woman who says she was bullied? Just help me, Huzzah.
I don't think she says she was bullied. I think the allegation was that she was a bully.
Oh, no, she made allegations that she had people in her electorate that were pushing her around and trying to get rid of her. And they had an investigation, said it was independent. Well, they appointed the lawyer that did it. And she got, some redacted allegations and redacted complaints. And, you know, it's very hard, these sorts of things, when personalities end up warring. It's just like in any workplace. You know what any of you have experienced this in a workplace. It is extremely hard to deal with, and this workplace is very public.
But
all I'm saying is, if you're going to call people a bully,
Linda Reynolds, has it happened? Has there been an investigation into what happened and whether there was any bullying?
Well, I was certainly part of a discussion that the whips had after that, so yes, it has.
There was an investigation.
My understanding is that yes. I mean, I actually talked. I mean, I'm certainly not going to reveal now what I said because it was.
But you gave evidence to them.
Well, it wasn't evidence. It was,
a point of view.
But you had an experience yourself, as I understand it.
No, I've never said that I have. Again, what I've talked about is the behaviour.
So was there a report as a result of this inquiry that unfolded?
That I haven't seen yet. So that I don't know, but there was certainly a process put in place, yes.
So you don't know what came of the conversations you had?
It may still well be underway. My assumption is that it is still underway, but yes, there was.
Don't you want to know what the outcome is?
Yes, but I'll have to wait till it's...
But you don't know what that is?
Not yet, no.
Is that enough when there are what seem to be pretty serious allegations of bullying?
Well, I think there should always be a process. And I think in the case of Julia Banks, I'm not sure if there is a process. But the more transparent and open that people can be about these issues, the better. And I think for Linda to be an assistant minister and not actually know what the outcome, what the timeline is of this process is probably a bit of a failing, I would say, on her party's behalf. But just getting back to Josephine's question, I think if you want to pursue a career in politics, then you should go for it. I mean, we need more women in politics, full stop. Women make up 50% of the population. And in my party, the Labor Party, we're nearly there. We're at 46% in the federal parliament, as opposed to the coalition that are at 10% women. So I think that our process of affirmative action has worked. Women are in winnable seats. They've, almost got to 50%. And I think that, yes, it is, as Amanda said, not something that you just take lightly in that sense. See, it is a kind of important profession where you do have to kind of deal with the roller coaster of all kinds of debate and
let's hear whether Josephine's been convinced. Has anyone said anything that makes you think, yep, I'm going to sign up?
Before you do, I can tell you one sentence why you should, because you can play a part in changing it.
Josephine, have you heard anything tonight that would make you feel more inclined to go into politics?
Yeah, I feel more confident now.
Because of what? What did you hear that...
Just the advice given and, just the arguments given.
So which side of politics are you going to... Come on, because they're both looking for candidates. All right, our next question tonight
Can I just say to Josephine, Hamish, can I just say, please go for it? And I'd say to any other young woman or young man listening to this tonight, I don't regret a single day that I've had in the Senate. And we can make a difference. We do make a difference. We do have to change how we behave. But I would say to anybody, if you're passionate about something and you want to change the world, do it from within the Parliament.
All right.
It can't be any worse than Twitter.
Hang around after the show. They might give you a job, Josephine. All right, our next question tonight comes from Marco Bellamo.
I'm greatly concerned about my future and the future of children all around the world who will suffer the consequences of climate change more than anyone else. A few days ago, thousands of students from around Australia, like me, went on strike from school to demand that the government acts on climate change. When will the government start to care about my future and the children around the world by acting on climate change and creating a strong climate policy?
Marco, were you involved in organising some of the demonstrations?
I help to get my school involved, and yes.
OK, so let's go to you, Billy Bragg. Do you think that young people are sort of being counted out of the equation when it comes to the debate around climate change? Because obviously students in Australia were told you should be in the classroom rather than out on the picket line.
I found that unbelievable. Obviously, the future of the planet is really in their hands. It's their future we're talking about. Of course, they should be able to make a stand. And I think particularly when they're being told by government ministers they should go back and learn more about coal. We don't need to learn any more about coal. They know about coal. That's why they're on the street. That's why he's out there. They already know the facts.
To be fair, I don't think they were being told to learn about coal. They were just told, get back to class.
No, but didn't
lawyers call that verbling someone?
Didn't one of the governments said they should go back and learn more about the coal industry?
Yes.
I think they were told they might be able to learn how to mine and that they might end up on the dole queue if they spent too much time on the picket line. Martin Matthews, do you have any particular problem seeing young kids out picketing?
Not at all. I think it's fantastic to see them out there and having a voice. And I attended the National Youth Parliament in 1999 when I was 21 years old. So that's 20 years ago. And in that Youth Parliament, we passed a cap-and-trade emissions trading scheme. So this is an issue that the youth of Australia have been talking about for such a long time that they're no longer young. So it's quite extraordinary, actually, at this point that we still don't have any kind of coherent national policy on energy. And no matter which end of the spectrum you are, I think, and as a business person, business people, we like certainty, and the energy industry needs certainty in order to be able to actually act on this. So,
Amanda Vanstone, telling kids that they can't be out protesting instead of at school, what are your thoughts on
I didn't say that, so I'm not a spokesperson for other people.
No,
but,
what do you think? That's what I'm asking.
Well, I think you can have a very useful exercise in understanding democracy by taking part in a protest. You can have a useful exercise in it if it's run properly, and you don't miss too much school, etc., etc. But it makes me sad to hear a young person say, people don't care about my future. Both the major parties have got policies. They disagree about them. But both of the major parties have got policies. Emissions are coming down. Some people want them faster. But, to just give the impression to young people that nobody cares, I think is a bad thing.
Marco has got his hand up, so let's just let him come back in. Do you feel disappointed at the way successive governments, not just this government, but successive governments in Australia have acted on climate change during your lifetime?
I feel, I feel very saddened to see the inaction, political inaction on climate change. And it is about the future of future generations. These decisions made by politicians are going to affect future generations, have such a great effect on them.
So when you hear Amanda Vanstone saying that both major parties do care about young people, do you believe that?
I don't believe that, because I see the Liberal Party still wanting to build new coal when we should clearly be transitioning to renewable energy to help save lives. Like, climate change is killing people, it's causing so much natural disasters. We need to transition, and if you're supporting the fossil fuel industry, then you don't truly care about the future generations.
All right, well, we've got another question. We have got another question. I'm going to come to you in a moment because we've got another question on this. And this question is from Andrew McGlade in the audience.
Senator Reynolds, in the past week, many Liberals in the federal parliament, including the Prime Minister himself, have been critical of the students protesting against climate action. How can you convince me at age 22 and other young Australians that the Liberal Party actually care what we have to say?
Well, thank you both very much, Andrew and Marco. And first of all, to Marco, I can assure you that as politicians on all sides of Parliament, we get in this to make a difference, and we get in it to make for our children, our grandchildren, our nieces, our nephews, to make a better future. So in relation to your concerns, we care about your future, we care about the planet, we care about your future. So we care about, are you getting the education that you need so that you can get a job, have a family and look after yourself? Will there be a job for you? Will there be an economy that you can live in? But on the environment, I do believe in climate change. I have just come back from the bushfires, 2 days in the bushfires up in Queensland. Unprecedented fires they're experiencing up there.
If you really cared, wouldn't you have a policy on climate change?
Well, here's the thing.
Because that's the reality. No, the Liberals don't have a policy on climate change.
I think I was asked the question then, Lisa.
But it's true.
Lisa, I think I was asked the question.
Well, it's the same question.
Well, I heard it once. So in relation to this, let's have a look at the facts. The first fact is, if we want to deal with climate change, Australia emits about 1% of the global total of carbon emissions. So yes, we do have to act here. But if we really want to get emissions down globally, the rest of the 99%, we've got to start looking at how, how we can work with other countries to do that. So we are.
But isn't that what things like the Paris Agreement are about? And there's members of your party saying we should pull out of that.
So we're on track to meet the Paris targets. We're now down at the lowest in 28 years of carbon emissions, both per capita and also by GDP. Yes, we've got more work to do, but the fact is, if people want affordable and reliable power, 65% is still from coal-fired power stations. Yes, we need to reduce it, but again, we've seen here in Victoria, you're talking about you might run out, you might not have power when it gets really hot here this summer. So we've got to find a balance between going to more renewables and alternate sources of energy, while still, when you need the power when it's hot, you can turn it on and you can afford to turn it on.
Both our questioners have their hands up again, so I just want to go back to Andrew McGlade. What would you like to respond to Linda Reynolds?
So you mentioned about fixing the economy as part of preparing a good future for young Australians, but is there need to be a wake-up call for the Liberal Party that won't matter if the environment is absolutely destroyed?
But it's not one or the other. We need to do both, because if we don't have money, we can't feed ourselves, educate ourselves and get a good future for our children. But we can't deal with the environment either, because to deal with environmental issues, it costs money. So we have to find a way to be able to do both. So it's not one or the other.
Lisa Singh.
Well, firstly, can I just give a big shout out to all of those students who took part in that protest, to send a message to the government that you want them to act on climate change, that you want them to have a policy on climate change, a policy on energy, because these are the things that aren't happening. And it is about the next generation and what we hand on to the next generation. There's some fantastic posters throughout that protest that really spelt that message out loud and clear. But the other thing that Linda points to is power prices. Power prices have continued to go up under the coalition, and emissions have continued to go up since 2011. So we're not on track at all. And the reason we're not on track is, again, goes back to this infighting within the Liberal Party between those that don't want action on climate change to those that do.
There were some failures when Labor was in government as well.
Well, come on.
No, surely not.
What was that expression? No carbon tax under any government.
Surely we had that many years of Labor and everything was fixed.
I think that was
the golden age. It was lovely.
Can we
the economy was great. We had power in South Australia.
All right, let's just
I
bring
remember
this
those
back.
good old days.
Have you finished butting in now? Because it's my turn.
In England, we call this
The reality is,
whataboutery.
though, that Labor was empowered during both of these questioners' lifetime, and you didn't solve the problem as far as Australia is concerned either.
Hamish, we have always had policies on climate change, on renewable energy, and indeed we have them right now.
Are you proud
We're
of the
not
way
even in
Kevin
government.
won?
We're not even in government, but the party in government doesn't have these policies, which is a sign to show they've given up on governing and why we need more.
Since when were you a spokesman for us?
Exactly.
All right, let's
Talk about
move
being
on
verbal.
and maybe step away from the partisan politics for a moment. Another Skype question this evening from Jane Paramore in Redfern in New South Wales. Jane.
Hi, Hamish. Excuse me while I just have a quiet fangirl moment. I'm very excited that you've got Billy Bragg on your panel this evening.
You can give her a wave,
You're a
Billy.
source of excitement, Billy.
I am. Stand back.
Jane, what's the question?
The question is, Billy, do you think that contemporary musicians can still awaken and motivate the broader public on these sorts of issues that we're discussing this evening? Or do you think that the music industry's gone all a bit centrist or even a bit conservative in much the same way that contemporary politics seems to have?
So, Billy, have you all gone a bit soft?
No, I think what's happened is that music has lost its vanguard role in youth culture. When I was first making music in the 70s, when I was 19 and wanted to talk about the world, I couldn't get on Q&A. I had to learn to play guitar, write songs, do gigs. That was the only medium available to me. And in some ways, music, although we didn't think of it like that, music was our social medium. It told us how to dress, it told us who to like, it told us who to not like, how to hang out. Now, if you're 19 and you're angry about the world, you've got a number of different ways that you can express yourself. On blogs, you can make a film on your phone. So music doesn't have a role, but it doesn't have that vanguard role, but it does have a role in preparing people to think about issues. It can help to set the agenda. It can help to offer a different perspective.
I've listened to you give concerts at music festivals. You talk quietly, you bring the audience in. I've also heard you give a lecture to bankers in the City of London. What motivates people more, do you reckon? The music?
I think the music does. The music, because the music gives you something you can't get on the internet, which is a sense of communion. It's whether it's a political song or a love song. Music can make you feel empathy for people that you've never met and for situations that you yourself has never been in. And in some ways, when you hear those songs, they prepare you in some ways to think about those ideas. I had this amazing thing about First World War veterans. In the First World War, PTSD manifested itself physically, a shell shock. People shook and couldn't speak. After Vietnam, PTSD manifested itself mainly as flashbacks. And the thinking behind this is that movies used flashbacks, and so the soldier's subconscious connected with that, and their subconscious found that as a way to deal with the stress. The reason I mention that is the implication from that is that any art, a play, a poem, a film, a song, can help you to psychologically prepare yourself for moments of stress. And I think that's the role that music plays. It doesn't have the agency to change the world, I'm afraid, I'm sorry to tell you. That's the job of politicians, and I respect them for that. But it can give you that different perspective that helps you to deal with the world.
Linda Reynolds, when you're preparing yourself to go into the Senate, you know it's going to be heated. What do you put on, the earphones or the stereo in the office? What gets you revved up?
Well, it's not the earphones in my office, but it's actually in my shower in the morning, getting ready for the day in the Senate, and I will play things like Justin Timberlake, I'll play Pitbull, Florida, to really just get myself pumped up and psychologically ready to go to battle.
You told me J-Lo.
And a bit of J-Lo
well.
occasionally, but it's really to psych myself up for the day.
And are we moving to it at the same time?
Yes.
How about you, Lisa Singh? When you're ready to go into the Senate, do you listen to music? What gets you?
I'm usually listening to Fran Kelly on the radio in the morning. Look, for me, music is a de-stress, and it's something I do to wind down. That can be in a classical form, but listening to a lot of our Australian artists, Angus and Julia Stone, the kind of Billy Bragg of Australia, Paul Kelly.
Great Paul Kelly.
If I want a more beautiful songwriting mood. But I think it is about mood, and I think what you touched on, Billy, is really integral to that. The way music can actually kind of, you know, emotionally,
it's important.
Emotionally
you can change
engage
your mood
you
without putting, you know, nefarious chemicals into your system. If you're a music fan, that's a very positive skill to have. To be able to heighten whatever mood you had or change that mood through music. It's a very special skill. Music that has that very special role in our society.
Martin, what do you listen to? You got a big meeting, you got a deal on the table. What do you prepare yourself with?
Look, I listen to a variety of things, and I think for me it's just, you know, music is about, there's a lot of distractions in the world. It's very hard to center yourself, and music does that. But
I want you to embarrass yourself on national television.
Look, if it's about pumping myself up for a big deal, then it's Dr. Dre, the next episode.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. And I'm guessing you're also into Dr. Dre, Amanda Vanstone.
If I need to calm down because I've got to go and deal with some people who are misbehaving and really giving me the pip, then I might put on something like Yo-Yo Ma. And my husband would say, "Are you depressed?" No, I'm just listening to Yo-Yo Ma. He finds it very depressing. But if I'm going into a meeting where it's going to be a bit difficult...
If you were going in to sort out the Liberal Party room...
Pitbull. Come on.
No, Healing Hands.
OK. All right. I feel like you've got something else you want to add. You've thought of another musician, haven't you, Linda?
No, no more musicians, but I just wanted to agree with Billy, and I think that songs and music still have a very powerful way of telling people's stories, and you hear it in popular music today, so you hear people's stories and you do get to understand people at different points of view and people's circumstance. So I think that they are just as important and as relevant and as powerful today as they ever have been.
That's why people are still wanting to go to festivals and gigs. You know, music's cheap as chips now, you get it everywhere, but people want that communal experience. You know, they want to feel that they're not alone, and that's one of the places you can find it.
There's still something wonderful, isn't there, about standing in a room full of people all kind of slightly swaying.
I mean, if you're in a room with a group of people and the person on stage is singing your favourite song and wrote that favourite song and 1,000 other people are singing it, whatever emotions you've attached to that song are kind of accepted by everybody in the room. It's very, very important.
Do you reckon our politics would find a new level if we just sent a lot of them off to a music festival for the weekend?
Well, on that, Hamish...
It depends on which one.
Last weekend, Labor announced our music policy, which is all about that. More investment in live music, Australian live music, more music teachers, more music lessons.
Music in schools, very important.
Absolutely.
Absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Give people that opportunity to express themselves.
I want to thank Billy for your music and what you've given us. I mean, you're not one of ours.
Don't thank him yet. We need him to perform for us at the end of the night.
The thing about it is I'm just singing about it. You're doing it. It's a very different thing. Music unfortunately can't change the world. Only the people can change the world.
Amanda Vanstone.
Music is very important, and it can bring people together. That's a good thing. But I can assure you, if you're the Customs Minister and you take the young Customs puppies to Parliament House, people who would like to push each other into an acid bath will actually stand together and cuddle this dear little puppy. The only thing you have to remember is not to take the drug dogs up to the press gallery.
I wouldn't know what you're talking about, Amanda Vanstone.
Amanda, thank you for that advice. I'm now the Minister responsible for Customs, so I think answering your question, we'll bring the dogs
someone
up.
tapped me on the shoulder and said, and what are you going to do if one of them, the quiet ones, because the other ones, the barky ones, do luggage and stuff, and what are you going to do if one of them sits down by next to a journalist? What are you going to ask the federal police officer to do? Right, they're not going.
Very wise. The next question tonight comes from Sally Lamshed.
Hi, yes, I wanted to discuss the Modern Slavery Act, which provides an imperative for businesses to assume responsibility for risks in modern slavery. However, without punitive measures for non-compliance, I wonder how this legislation can send a strong enough message to enact change.
We have two senators here tonight who've both worked on this, so let's begin with you, Senator Linda Reynolds.
Well, look, thanks for your question. And today there are more slaves than there have ever been in any other time of history. And not only do we have more slaves, we also have people who are enslaved here in Australia.
Can we just describe what a slave looks like today? When we discuss modern-day slavery, it's not necessarily someone in chains in a basement. Could look very different to that.
It does. So when you say the word slavery today, we still do think of people in shackles and chains going from Africa to the New World, you know, in hulks. But today the chains very rarely, sometimes they still are physical chains, but mostly they're psychological or they're psychological chains, so that people have lost their freedom to do anything. So they can't break away and they're not doing this work by choice. Because
so there might be migrant labour brought to a country.
It might be migrant labour.
Their visa is attached to the job that they're in and the employer holds that over them to prevent them being able to move freely.
We've got to be very clear because there's a great difference between poor work practices, like things that come under the Fair Work Act. So they are bad, but what we're talking about is where people have no individual freedom. They are forced to work for the profit of somebody else. And it is big business. People are enslaved by others who don't care about them and who just see them as a commodity to use and to exploit their labour.
So to the question, do these new regulations or laws do much if companies are not compelled to comply?
Yes, I do. I believe they will. So the purpose of this legislation for the first 3 years is to do two things. First of all is to increase knowledge in our biggest companies, but also in Australian society of what slavery is today, and also how we contribute to it. Because everybody here would be utterly appalled to think that the clothes you buy, the food you eat, have actually come at the expense of someone's slave labour. But that is the reality for, in terms of many companies. So for many companies who source most of their goods, and I believe Martin's company is in this category, is we've asked them to have a look through their supply chains, and it's a bit of an odd thing because we've asked them to look through their supply chains and we've said to you, well, please, we want you to go and find modern slavery and we want you to deal with it. So if you have a punitive approach from the beginning, then it doesn't encourage that virtuous behaviour. And I was talking to Martin earlier, and I think he's a great example of why it will work.
So Martin, tell us how this affects your company. You do business in China, for example.
We do, yep.
How would you go about discovering whether or not someone that's making a piece of clothing for you in a place you've maybe never been might be working under slave conditions?
So this isn't actually new for us, and I think one thing to point out is that the industry and community groups have already done a lot of work on this, and that's because of customers' expectations. So, all customers want to know that their goods are sourced ethically. They certainly don't want slaves anywhere near their supply chain, and so there's been great work done by organisations like Baptist World Aid, who've been publishing ratings on companies for some years now that publicly tell us whether or not those companies are going up the supply chain to find out what's going on in their factories. And for us, it's really about being on the ground. So we have a team of people that work in Asia, and they work closely with our factory partners to monitor working conditions. And we're always looking to improve the working conditions. And I think what this legislation does, it does something that we've been doing for a while, but not all companies have been doing, which is really just shining a light on the supply chain. And visibility does drive action. So to your question about, are punitive measures required? Well, we're trying to sell things to customers, right? So if we have a report that's public that says that we're using slaves to make those things, it's pretty unlikely people are going to buy those things. So believe me that visibility will drive behaviour change. It will drive companies to act on their supply chains. And the great news is it's already happening, and largely because of customers' expectations.
Let me bring Lisa Singh in. Would you like to see punitive measures? Do you think that would be the most effective way of establishing this?
I think it's another component of a Modern Slavery Act that is important. To get to Sally's question, what we're talking about is asking, as the current legislation stands that Linda and I and others worked on, businesses with a turnover of $100 million, so that's pretty large businesses in Australia, having to report, but not having to, in a sense. And I just don't think, if you look at your company aside, Martin, and you're a great example of taking your own action in that sense, but there are a lot of companies that are not. I don't think you can just ask companies to police themselves. So the idea would be that to have some sort of penalty process in place that compelled businesses to make sure that they report it. And I say that because we look at what happened in the UK. The UK didn't introduce any penalties in relation to their Modern Slavery Act, and only 30% of businesses reported. So
why in Australia did we come back? Because obviously it was being discussed.
Yeah.
Why have we ended up in a situation where there aren't punitive measures and it's just basically about internal compliance measures?
Because the government wouldn't agree to Labor's amendments.
No, well, that's actually not true. So.
Well, no, it is.
No. Just let me explain. You asked the question. So what we did is we modelled our legislation on the UK legislation, but they had a number of gaps. They didn't have a central register, and it wasn't a register available to the public, so they could go and see that their company was reporting and what they were reporting. So we've learnt from that, and we will have a public register, so with lists all the companies that we think should be reporting. Every year, the Minister will have to report back to the Parliament of who is not complying. So not only will shareholders and consumers see who is and who isn't, but also the Minister will report back to Parliament every year. And
Does
also
that explain why you moved back from the possibility of having punitive measures in place?
But we actually haven't. So what we did is we did listen to the Labor Party and also the Parliamentary Committee, and we did make changes. So what we've said is the first 2 years is about implementation, working with the 3,000 companies so that they know what they have to do and we help them on the process to do it. And they don't have to start reporting for another 2 years. So at that 3-year mark, we've made a mandatory review. So we'll have a look at that point to see how it's working. Is our register and the additional steps we've taken from the UK, are they working? And if not...
Do you accept that explanation?
If not, Lisa knows that we've put into the review, do we need penalties? Do we need an independent commissioner? And what other things do we need to do?
Does that satisfy you?
Well, look, I take the goodwill that Linda's approached this whole process, because I've worked very closely with Linda. It's been a great example of Parliament working across the chamber well together.
To each other.
But I have to correct you, Linda. We put up amendments to the Modern Slavery Act, to the bill. One of them was to introduce penalties on businesses, and one of them was to introduce an anti-slavery commissioner, particularly for victims, so they've got somewhere to turn and that can educate the broader business community. And both of those parts were voted down by the government.
Billy Bragg, I want to turn this over to you. Do private corporations, big businesses, multinationals do the right thing unless they are forced to?
I think one of the things that we're most missing in the modern economy is accountability. I really do think that, and it's not something we think about in terms of democracy, but it really should be about anybody who has any power over you, including economic power. And I think at a time when authoritarianism as an idea seems to be on the rise across our major trading partners, in China on one hand, United States of America and another. The need for economic accountability is great. And the big issue as well, I think, for my understanding of this in the UK, is what's happening in the black economy as well. Below, you know, the businesses like Martin's that are above the board, how, without the law, do you get into those areas? Because they're certainly not going to report without any encouragement.
Right. Remember, if you hear any doubtful claims on Q&A, let us know on Twitter, and keep an eye on the RMIT ABC Fact Check and the Conversation website for the results of those questions. We do have time for one last question tonight, and it is from Craig Rowley in the audience.
Thank you. Facing a world of post-truth and fake news, Brexit and backs turned on globalisation, yellow jacket riots in Paris, and Australian politics becoming prime ministerial musical chairs, it's easy to understand why Billy Bragg once noted, "The temptation is to give in to cynicism." But then, on a note of optimism, Billy also encouraged us, saying, "You've got to overcome that and engage in building a different consensus." So my question is, what is that different consensus that will bring us back together to look after each other and help each other prosper? And how do we best set about engaging with each other in building that consensus?
Big question, Billy Bragg.
Well, I mean, I think firstly by identifying our cynicism, I think that, you know, the idea of, you know, I'm not talking about doubt. Never trust anyone who doesn't have any doubts. It's the most human of all vices, and not even scepticism. You can learn something off a sceptic. But there are some people out there who've kind of given up, and they want you to give up too. It makes them feel better. You know, that's what I'm talking about, those kind of people. And by identifying our cynicism and curbing it and committing ourselves to keep engaging in the process, no matter what things throw at us.
But do you have a perception of what that different consensus actually looks like?
No, because it's a consensus. You know, I have my idea of what I think will be a great society, but I recognise that there are other people out there who have other views, and whether we can find enough of an overlap so that the majority of people can benefit, so that we take on board, you know, the opinions that are broadly held. At the moment, unfortunately, things seem to be coming apart around that.
Amanda Vanstone, in this polarised world, in this polarised country, is there something, do you think, that we can find a new consensus around?
Sure. I don't think we're as polarised as, for example, Europe and the United States. In fact, we're a very good example of a democracy, despite the Liberal Party having some issues at the moment, not the Parliament, the Liberal Party. I mean, I presume you haven't sat on your bum all day and done nothing when things have been going on in the Liberal Party. You get on with your work. Parliament gets on with things. I think we are a pretty good example. But look, I read a book recently which was written for the environmental movement by an environmentalist, and it's called I'm Right and You're an Idiot. And what he says is this approach will never work. I mean, I was born a Republican, and I know that I'll never convince a monarchist by going up and saying, Prince Charles is an idiot, you shouldn't be voting for them. You know, it's just not how it works. So this combative style, in the end, doesn't work. And what the book advocates is if you have a different view, say to someone, well, why do you think that? And this is why I think this.
So you're saying the same thing as Billy Bragg, just decrease your cynicism a little bit. Be open to their view.
It means actually working together. It means less in social media, so-and-so's an idiot, less in the Parliament, so-and-so's an idiot, although in the world there are idiots, as we know.
You know you're on
Q&A see what I mean.
Tonight, Amanda.
Don't say to people, you're an idiot. Ask them why they think that, and have a discussion with them and see if you can win them over, and you'll find consensus.
I mean, it does sound like we're moving dangerously towards a consensus on this issue, but Martin, what do you think? Is there something that our community in Australia can come back together around? Because whether Amanda's right or not, it feels like we are pretty divided at the moment.
Yeah, look, I don't think there's one thing. I think Amanda is quite right. It is about how we have conversations, and I think probably the one thing, you know, that I'd like to see is just better leadership, and I think that's we do have a vacuum at the moment of good leadership and leaders that people trust. We certainly have that in the party political system, but I think there's an opportunity for sort of everybody to play a greater role in that. And I think anyone here that's asked a question tonight, anyone here that's participated in a debate, they're all showing a form of leadership. And so, you know, hopefully with that, we'll find a little bit of an emergence of you know, perhaps people listening to each other, and that way we might be able to move forward. So
I wonder if you're feeling a little bit more hopeful after all of that, Craig Rowley.
I'm very hopeful that there's a consensus that we will all applaud Billy playing a song.
We absolutely will. Have you got a view as to how we all come together in Australia?
Look, I do, and I get up and I go to work every morning in this job, and I'm full of hope, and I see so much wonderful, so many wonderful attributes in Australians. And again, I was at the bushfires for the last 2 days, and when things get tough in Australia, we see the best in Australians. And I saw that in Queensland, in people coming together. And yes, we've got some things, and I agree with everything that the panellists have said, that we need to find better ways of not just having opinions and expressing opinions, but having reasons for those and being able to debate the issues. And hearing sort of Marcus and others here tonight, I'm full of hope. But we do have to have better discussions amongst ourselves, and we need to hear more from you, because you elect us to represent you. And if we don't know what you think and what you want us to do about it, it makes our job very difficult.
Lisa Singh, do you think our politicians actually have some responsibility at this point to shape that better conversation, discover what that new consensus is and describe it for us all?
Absolutely. I mean, I actually think that action on climate change is actually a way that we can form that consensus, and that we can actually have it,
Seriously?
and actually have a shared common humanity, because it is about the future of our planet. It's an issue that affects all of us. It's not about politics, it's about our planet. And I think that is a way we can come together under a common interest and share that common humanity. But we have to take the politics out of it.
But the other trouble is we're in this situation around the world, whether you're close to it or in Australia or not, because we are falling off of a consensus about neoliberalism. We're falling off of a consensus that the market has the answer to all our problems. That's been the consensus from the last 30 years. It's failed a lot of people.
That's the problem.
And now being told, growth is going to make you rich, and it's only certain people being made rich. It's the end of that consensus that we're living through at the moment. That's why we need to see something that does unite us globally, as Lisa was saying, in climate change, to go forward.
Well, and I don't think it'll happen on any issue in a singular sense unless people have a completely changed attitude to treating each other civilly on a day-to-day basis on all issues. You can't just say, well, we're going to fight like cat and dog on this, but we'll be nice on climate change. No, we have to be civil. John Kennedy said, civility is not a sign of weakness, and we need to remember that in every aspect of our negotiating lives.
And that is what we're all about on Q&A. That is all we have time for tonight. Please thank our panel: Amanda Vanstone, Billy Bragg, Linda Reynolds, Lisa Singh and Martin Matthews. And Billy, that is your cue to go and get yourself ready. Next Monday is the final Q&A of the year. Tony Jones is back in the chair alongside the President of the Senate, Liberal Senator for Victoria, Scott Ryan, the Deputy Leader of the Parliamentary Labor Party, Tanya Plibersek, prominent lawyer and community activist, Nyadol Nguyen, and the editor of the conservative British magazine, Spiked, Brendan O'Neill. Well, we will leave you tonight with Billy Bragg. He's going to be performing a song that is all about what we've just been discussing, climate change as well as calls to action. It is called King Tide and the Sunny Day Flood. Thank you for your time tonight. It's been a pleasure. Good night.
I want to dedicate this to Marco and his mates. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could save the world and all, simply by collecting up tin cans and empty bottles? We all want to believe it's true, but it don't matter what you do, so long as we continue to burn our way through fossils. Now it should come as no surprise to hear about the ocean's rise. Polar caps are melting with every year that the planet warms. Now people have to understand, we're gonna feel it far inland. It's gonna shift the seasons and supercharge the storms. The king tide is coming, the king tide is a-coming. The king tide is a-coming, bringing flooding on a sunny day. King tide is a-coming, can't you hear the meltwaters running? The king tide is a-coming, gonna wash everything away. And you know the oceans, they connect us all. No one can just build a wall. We have to work together we can do this on our own. To think that you can stand aside is nothing more than foolish pride, 'cause everyone's a libertarian till the brown water floods their home. Now you may live on higher ground, feeling like you're safe and sound, thinking as you look around, this is your lucky day. But everyone beneath the sky soon we're looking for somewhere high and dry. Nothing you can ever do will keep them all at bay, because the king tide is a-coming, the king tide is a-coming, the king tide is a-coming, bringing flooding on a sunny day. The king tide is a-coming, can't you hear the meltwaters running? The king tide is a-coming, gonna wash everything away. The king tide is a-coming and we have to act today.